Welcome to the Digital Amateur Television Experimenters Night. This is VK7OTC, the club station of the Radio and Electronics Association of Southern Tasmania. Amateur radio is a worldwide hobby that has many different aspects. Digital television is just one of the many modes and areas that are covered. Maybe you're interested in becoming involved in the DATV Experimenters Nights. You realise that you do not have to be a radio amateur or need any ATV equipment to participate anywhere in the world. Also participate on the night by coming up to the Queen's Domain clubrooms. Yes, right on top of the Queen's Domain in the heritage-listed Coast Wireless Station. You never know, we might get you in front of the camera or behind doing one of the many roles during the night. We get underway with our program on a Wednesday night from 7:30 p.m. local time. We'll see you soon. This is VK7 OTC.
So I'm going to pass the microphone this way to Ron to start off.
And I'll pass it this way.
Oh, keep going that way.
Oh, we're not going to go full circle, are we?
Next one.
Harry, you've got 10 minutes.
Times 1, 2, 3, 4.
So, my first international contact was back in 2021, I think it was. I spoke to, it was right after the Sewing Circle group net. The guy must have been listening right towards the very end, and he was from Germany, I think he was. Germany or somewhere near there. And had a bit of a hello and asked how he went and that. Obviously the QSO couldn't go for too long because he had a bit of interference his end, so he couldn't quite he could hear me to some extent, but not enough to sit and chat for hours to have a good QSO. So the fact that I got a chance to work my first international station was absolute amazing. One of the most best things to ever do. I don't think I've worked much international stations since. I think I've only done once or twice on DMR, the digital voice, which is pretty easy to do. You just pick a talk group internationally and key it up and say hello and see who's there. But HF, it has that sense of accomplishment and achievement that you've made a contact of someone and your voice has gone from local to Germany or the US or France or wherever it's gone to. It's absolutely amazing as well. All right.
What band did you work him on HF?
That was 80 metres.
On 80 metres.
That's
Yeah.
really good.
That is pretty
It surprised me.
Mm.
Like he was a little bit noisy, but I could hear him, and I could definitely hear him out of the noise, and it was just absolutely amazing. Like I told Mum and how excited I was. I made this first international contact on HF. It was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. I was full of joy, I guess you could say.
Harry, I thought of one if the microphone can come back this way.
Ah, yep. All right. I'll hand it over to Ron.
Right. So I've had my foundation license for a couple of years now, but I haven't really been that active using it. I've got too many other hobbies. And I was setting up my antennas, making sure they're okay, because I'm entering the RD contest this weekend. It's going to be my first contest. So I was using my 705 here on 10 watts, and I was tuning around the 40 metre band, and I heard a CQ call coming in, a VK3. That's the furthest I've got yet. And so I took up this bloke on the CQ, and we started talking for a while. And then he was quite proud of telling me what setup that he had, and he wanted to know what I had. So he said he's got a one of the Icom brands of radios or something, and a valve amplifier, and he was putting out, I think he said 200 watts, and described the antenna and everything that he had. And he was coming through, I was getting him pretty clear. So then he asked what I had, and I said, oh, well, I've just got a 705, and I'm putting out 10 watts. And I was using a long wire, end-fed long wire antenna, and he couldn't believe it. He said I was getting through to him so clear that he said that everything must be working okay. So I suppose with DX, a couple of takeaways. If the conditions are in and you've got everything tuned up properly and all that, and everything's working, it's just amazing what you can do, and you don't have to have such high power to do it. So that's my DX story, I suppose. Oh,
Come on, really?
I'm a virgin.
Just long.
Yes, I'll tell you one. This happened quite a few years ago, back in the late 80s, when I was VK6BAJ up in the Pilbara. And this was in the late 80s when they had that very strong sunspot maximum. And I had this was on 10 metres, and I heard this call just booming through, 5.9. And I couldn't believe it. On the next over, this guy was, I still remember him, Peter. He was a QRP operator, and he was only putting out 5 watts of power. And he was 5. You can imagine this guy was absolutely elated with putting out 5 watts and getting a 5.9 signal report from a VK6 station. And the other way, it wasn't so good. He gave me a 5.7, but I was putting out 100 watts. And oh yes, I've never forgotten that contact. I've got the QSL card out in the car. I'll bring it in later. He actually had it at the bottom. Thanks for listening to my 5 watts RF at the bottom of the QSL card. So that was one I can remember. I'm trying to drum up a few more, but I haven't had that many contacts, international contacts down here, but I had loads and loads of them up in, when I was up in Tom Price, because it was virtually exclusively HF up there, because it's your remote area. It's 300 k's to the nearest petrol station when you leave town, so nothing in between. Anyway, I'll pass it. That's one I can remember. I'll pass it on if Gary's got anything to add.
Well, I haven't chased DX a lot, really. I sort of take it as it comes. So I've got the odd station around the place, I suppose, that may be or maybe not exotic, but when I was looking through the log this afternoon, back in the days when I kept the log and could understand it, I saw Rotuma Island there on 10 metres, so I guess Rotuma for the DX people only has expeditions going there. I'm not sure, but anyway, I don't even know where Rotuma is, to be honest. somewhere I presume in the Pacific, but anyway, I'm pretty certain that they have an expedition there once in a while, so maybe it's rare, don't know. So I don't really have any great DX stories. One, I'm not sure whether I've told this story before, maybe not. But where I lived, there used to be a lot of trees around, and there was 6 trees in a bit of a pattern, and I thought, oh, this will be handy. I'll string up something here. So I decided I'd put up a delta loop. Yeah, delta. I think it was a wire quad to start with, and it didn't tune up very well. But when I went into a delta configuration, it was a bit better. So I was pretty impressed with that. So I thought, oh well, here we go. Put a reflector behind it, and did that, and it was still going pretty good. And then I put a director in front of that, so I had three element delta loop on 15 metres, and they were all hanging on rope, and I still had plenty of space at the front on the director side of it because the trees were a fair way apart, and I had plenty of spare copper around, being an electrician. So let's add some more directors. So we go up to 5, and it was starting to sag a bit in the middle, but under the weight of it all. But I figured all that out and deployed a couple more ropes over to some other trees, got it all up level again, and still had more space over to the last of the trees. So, well, here we go again. Anyway, I ended up with a 10 element wire antenna, which may or may not be working at some sort of efficiency. But anyway, the thing was, every time I turned the radio on 15 metres, I could hear Japan. No matter what time of day, there was Japanese there. And one day there, it was a bit quiet and not much happening, so I put out a CQ, and this guy came back to me with an American accent and blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, you're the only guy I can hear. And he said, what, do you run a kilowatt or something? And I said, not really, no. And I sort of sussed it was beaming up the east coast of Australia and towards Japan and up sort of to the north pretty well. Anyway, it turns out this guy was on Truck Island in the Pacific there, and being the American accent and everything, and I sort of knew a little bit about the history of Truck Island from World War II. I presumed he was on a Navy base or an Air Force base or something belonging to America, and he was telling me that I was the only signal there that he could hear at the time, and he said he was running 1.5 kilowatts, and I said, well, I'm only running 100 watts. And I said, but you'd be using the company radio, wouldn't you? And he said, yes, that's right. And he said the antenna, you can walk out to the antenna at low tide. So the antenna system that he was using was obviously at some military base of some sort up there. And about an hour or so after that, I come across another guy with an American accent, and he was in Guam. And when you look on the map, they're in line, sort of going up from our place to the north. So the beam actually worked to a certain extent, but then had a big wind came along, and trees all moved out of phase, and everything loosened up, and the ropes broke, and it ended up down on the ground. So, but I do have it curled up in the back of my shed, in pieces.
In a milk crate.
No, it's not in a milk crate. No. Yeah, no, I have a good supply of milk crates. Yeah, so that's about me. I just don't chase a lot of DX. I just sort of take it as it comes.
Oh, well, I don't chase DX either. But, having said that, my old mate here, I said, I've never worked a DX station ever. And Bob said, I'll help you out.
Oh, yeah.
When you went to Bruni on the ferry that day, remember? He gave me a DX contact on Channel 50.
Overseas.
Does that count?
Overseas.
Yeah, it was overseas. Now you can tell the truth.
Yeah, no. Look, it's been such a long time since I played with HF. I've sort of been off the air for many years and getting back into it now. So I find it rather difficult to find find DX, I should say, nowadays. It used to be back in the late 90s, early 80s, it was everywhere. At the peak of the cycle, I guess. But now I hear locals around Australia. I get on a few nets of a night, but that's it. Nothing exotic at all. Anyway, that's it for me.
My interest in DX has always been VHF and above. All the way up to 474 terahertz. But the little story is, when I started my second career here in Tasmania, and Juffy used to talk to me, I forget who told me, is you can't work out of Hobart on 2 metres. And
Do you know who said that?
I don't know. No.
I know who said that.
Who was
I've
it?
heard this. Just Joe Gilston said that.
It wasn't Joe.
Wasn't it Joe? I'm sure it was Joe.
Was someone local.
Oh, here.
Here, yes.
Maybe Brian Morgan.
However, they did say
Someone like that.
there's a guy up north who does work DX on 2 metres,
Oh.
and it was Joe
That's-
Gelston.
Yeah.
So I got in touch with Joe, and we found we could actually work each other on 2 metres. And Joe said to me, next weekend, the Leonids meteors are coming in. And I never heard of the Leonids meteors, but I got on my rig and I'm listening, and I hear a couple of VK2s on 2 metres bouncing off this Leonids meteors. Now the Leonids come off a comet that only turns up once every 32 years.
Wow.
And it happened to be this year when I first got on, and I thought, well, this is all pretty good. That got me interested in VHF DX, and since then I've got something like 72 national and state VHF records. Most of them have been overtaken by other people since. One of them at least, on 1296. And 5 world records. The difficulty of working long distance on, say, 10 gigs is you need to do it off the moon. Although I have worked from Tassie to Western Australia on 10 gigs.
Which is no mean feat.
No.
Which is the current terrestrial world record. But the problem with the moon is you've both got to see the moon, and if everybody is on the opposite side of the Earth, the moon's not visible to both ends. And I worked out that if I went to New Zealand, I could work this guy in UK, and I'd have 5 minutes of common window. And we worked each other for the 10 gigs EME world record. That's my...
Is that theoretically the furthest then?
It's the furthest on 10 gigs. People have done it. It was 18,900. The radius of the Earth is 40,000 kilometres, so the maximum you're ever going to work is 20,000, but when you're working 20,000, you're both beaming through the Earth. So 18,900, I think on 2 metres they've worked from New Zealand to the UK about 19,200, when there was some refraction at both ends to get round. Okay.
Well, being a Z call, my DX experience has also been VHF area, but nothing compared to my learned colleague here, who holds world records and things. Mine have all been kind of accidental things, and I think, look, I was with Hayden here one day when we managed to work 70 centimetres into New Zealand. That was pretty good. That was pretty special. But I think one of my most memorable contacts was actually during a spring VHF UHF field day. We don't really normally get any propagation on any VHF bands that's significant. And I made a contact which I thought was pretty impressive. And I just looked it up now. It was 2020 spring field day. It was the longest verified contact logged, was 1,823 kilometres on 6 metres. Now that's not particularly impressive for 6 metres. However, it was one of these field days where I hadn't really had time to prepare, and before I had the field day van. And I was running 6 metres barefoot off the 818 at a maximum theoretical of 6 watts. Well, I'm sure it doesn't quite achieve that. Into a 2 metre 5/8 vertical on the bull bar, sort of looking a little bit like a quarter wave on 6. So, and it was the only contact, it was the only 6 metre that I heard anywhere outside of Hobart for the whole day. And it was just north of Brisbane. So that was accidental, and yeah. I suppose the other thing too is being sort of, in and out of the hobby a bit since I've had my licence due to, family things. I haven't always been there when the solar sunspot's been great. But last year in the Oceania DX contest, I think I worked more 15 metre stations than I worked since I've had my licence, like 25 years. So, yeah, it's interesting. I don't think any of them were particularly rare DX, but, they were all over the world. You've got awesome DX.
You are the DX.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a really big DX chaser, but I'd say the DX that I have done mostly have been on 20 meters, and I guess my whole HF life, if you like, started maybe 15 years ago when I first got my foundation license, and a good friend of mine lent me his FT7, Yaesu FT7, to sort of get on air with, and I just needed an antenna. And I was at the fork in the road, which is the Mitre 10 out at Huntingfield, in the gardening section there, and I saw some, among sort of gardening accessories, there were bits of cardboard with some wrapped up galvanized wire, sort of like 20 meters length, and I thought, hang on, if I got 2 of these, that'll probably get me a dipole. And I took them home and managed to rig up an inverted V. So I thought, well, what happens now then? And I think it was on a Thursday evening. There is a Southern Tasmania Wyson group, and at that time there was, I think, a Queenslander, a ham, taking care of the Matsaika Island lighthouse. And this Wyson group had a regular Thursday evening sked with him. And so I joined into the Wyson group there, and managed to talk to the chap on Matsaika Island, and that was my first HF contact, which I was pretty thrilled about. Not exactly DX, but it did cross some water at least, and I thought the destination was interesting too. So yeah, that was a nice start. Anyways, some years later, I've gained my advanced license and had the luck of going down to Antarctica and spending the winter there at Casey Station. And I thought, well, for this occasion, going down there, better get myself a nice radio. So didn't take me long to order the 7300 and some spares. So down I went, and once I got settled in, I found a spot to rig this up, and really the only antenna I could get set up properly for my use was an inverted V. From my location there, it seemed to be just sort of limited times as to when the propagation was good to get out from there. But luckily it just happened to be in the middle of the day when I could take an hour's lunch break. So that was good. Almost every lunch then I'd rush into what we'd call affectionately the hobby hut, and I'd try my luck there. And when conditions were okay, most of my contacts were to Australia. I did about 600 contacts, whereby half of those were to Australia and the other half were to some 40 different countries around the world. So yeah, that was my big leap into DXing. And what I found particularly useful then too was to sort of get a better idea who you're talking to and so on, was to have a computer nearby where you could have QRZ running, QRZ.com. And another website which I found particularly useful called DX Watch. This is a site where users can submit any activity that they spot or want to make an announcement or so. And so you might find an interesting contact or signal happening on a band and you want to know who that is. You might be lucky that someone else has already listed it on DX Watch, and you can then decide whether you want to make an effort to get in and exchange a contact with them. So apart from that, yeah, I've never really set myself up for contesting, but yeah, no, it was just basically the 100 watt transceiver with a hand mic, inverted V antenna outside, and away you go. So it just depends. Sometimes you find yourself working well just about to anywhere around the world, and at other times it's just not happening, and yeah, a bit disappointing then, but that's the way propagation might work. Earlier this year I spent some time in Victoria, and I had a shack set up in a small town called Ferny Creek up in the Dandenong Ranges, and from there I managed to do a few contacts, and the antenna I used there that worked quite well was just a simple N-fed half-wave antenna, and that tuned up really nicely, and no problem getting around the world with that one. So yeah, it is with a little bit of trial and error. It's amazing what you can do when you want to work DX. So yeah, that's pretty much my story. Now I just have to catch up printing and sending out all my QSL cards, the VK7 as well as the VK01's a little bit behind on that one. Yeah. Okay, any questions? I'll hand the mic
The
on.
power you were using down in Antarctica, what power was the radio?
What power? Yeah, 100 watts. So basically what the rig would give me. Yeah. I did have a look at what HF facilities the station had, but HF is virtually not used anymore at the station, and a lot of the exciting HF gear is pretty much neglected and maybe not operational, which is sad, but it's kind of the way I guess modern communications is going. Yeah.
What is modern communications in Antarctica?
Yes, so it's okay, well, we have limited broadband down there, so not like the NBN, but it's via satellite, and to Casey, at least at that time. Things will be changing though, but at that time we had about 9 megabits per second, which allowed us, I guess, to have a broadband connection for phone and data to Australia and to the rest of the world. Locally within the station, it's all VHF communications, typically the marine band VHF channels, and Yeah, and I guess if necessary, then sat phone as well. But I think even within the last 2 years since I've come back, yeah, they are implementing more modern digital equipment, and I think Macquarie Island I think is already serviced with Starlink, and it's possibly I think a few stations or individuals or countries are actually trying to use Starlink down south in Antarctica as well.
He's got satellites on polar orbits to cover the
Yeah.
poles.
Yeah, the coverage isn't very good, but I think there are some satellites that give.
So what satellite system were you using to get your 7 meg?
Our satellite system is the. Let me think. I think it's the Intelsat.
Intelsat's
be right?
the main one.
Yeah, Intelsat, which is a geostationary satellite.
And it covers Antarctic.
Just
right on the edge. What's the dish? What's the look angle of the dish?
It's just it points right to the horizon. You could
Yes,
say, yeah.
It's about 8 degrees for Casey, I think.
The problem with all of the commercial services is how much money do you want to spend? So you trade off your dollar cost versus how much bandwidth you want to give to stations. Macquarie Island's got NVN as well, the Skymaster, and there's 2 terminals there. On a
The spot beam over Macquarie Island.
Yeah, because back in the days when NBN was being formed, they said that it had to cover all Australia and the external islands. The external islands include Macquarie Island. So Macquarie Island's got its own spot beam. This is where when you get into things like Starlink and those other commercial entities, it's good for being down south because there's not many users.
Yep.
And so you've got a fixed amount of a fixed amount of bandwidth for basically one customer, compared with in Melbourne where you might have a fixed amount of bandwidth for 20,000 people. You just hope that it'll not all at the same time as you.
But the satellites have to talk to each other because there's no ground station.
They laser link.
Yes.
They laser link back to their ground stations. But even with the AAD satellite system, you are cross-linking to other ground stations and backwards and forwards. So like, it's not as if it's just up and down. Then you go back. The Mawson Lakes, it's in Adelaide, is one of the control areas for them. So you're actually going back to Mawson Lakes and then back down. And if you're talking from Davis to Mawson, like a Mawson station, you're actually doing it through 2 different satellites because they're on different beams. One's over the Indian Ocean and one's over the eastern side.
So they come back to 2 ground stations and then link and then go back up again.
That's changed.
That'd be latency squared.
Yeah. They're both on different satellites.
Yeah, when I was there, we
So I might pass
3
the microphone
mainland
on.
stations were on the same satellite, and it was a hemisphere coverage.
Okay.
Because we used to get TV as a byproduct of the hemisphere beam that we were in, which was India transmitting to all their little Indian states around the Pacific and everywhere else. Star TV.
So when I was at Willis, we had 2 satellites we could choose from on our TV.
We've got a bit away from the topic here.
Yeah, just a bit. DX.
Very good. It was very good having 2
Well, that's
separate
DX,
satellites.
I
You could actually, because one's on West Australian time, one's on Eastern Standard Time. So if you miss something on that one, you can watch it an hour and a half later or 2 hours later.
As far as DX for me, I don't do it much now. Originally I had a Z-call. I was located in Melbourne, and my best DX at that time was Mount Gambier. This was in the late 60s when we had all valve equipment, homebrew transmitter and receiver. So I thought that was fairly good.
Is that FM? That was FM?
No, AM. Oh, this is a long time ago. This is proper communications.
Borrowed from work.
No, I wasn't working at the time. I was still at school. So mine's stolen. Yeah. So that was 69 and I think 1969. That was all AM, and then I sort of lost interest in that. I found a few other things to do, mainly cars, motorbikes and surfing.
I didn't think you were going to say those.
No, never girls. Then around about 1981 I sort of started up again. I also did the VK0, the Antarctic thing. And yeah, I did a bit of DX from Davis in 1981 to a lot of different countries. I've got no idea where they were now.
They were north.
No, Dave, not all that far south really, but never mind. Most of that was on 100 watts, valve equipment again. Antennas were a little more interesting. Generally was one of the V's we had down there, which was a 400 foot per leg, pointed at Australia, the east coast of Australia, but it worked in all directions. I was conned into going on a few DX nets by a friend in Melbourne. Conveniently, he did all the QSL paperwork as well. All I had to do was operate. So that was 1981. After that, I was prone to steer clear of anything to do with DX, and I'm pretty much still the same on HF. That while down there, all HF bands, 80 metres through to 10 metres, and in 1981, 10 metres, when it was open to the world, and all you needed a couple of milliwatts and you could work anywhere. No noise, no digital rubbish yet in 1980s. It got progressively worse through the 80s.
What was your background noise like when you were there then?
Virtually no background noise.
Warren, what about you?
Yeah, the QRM is atrocious. So it's a lot of noise on station.
Yeah.
And I think it's just due to lots of modern electronics spread out everywhere.
The funny story there is that, yes, the digital noise did increase and the radio section was suffering from a lot of QRM. And I tracked it down in the main source of it in 1987 at Mawson to the ups that we'd installed in all the buildings, including the satellite building, the radio office. Yeah, we were interfering with our own services, and that was the peak of the HF down there. That was a big HF installation. So, and yeah, conditions were good. 1981. Commercial frequencies we were using up 19 megs and would have gone higher if we had one. 15 metres was open a lot of the time. That was a good band not to go on, because if you went on that you'd never get off it. A certain country used to...
Japan?
I couldn't say anything. But I just had to be rude at times and say I've got work to do and I'm now going QR, and before I got to the T I'd switch it off because otherwise I'd still be calling, and I suspect they still would. But yeah, so a little bit of DX, 2 metre one was good. HF, yeah, it was interesting. I think there was a 3-letter call sign I worked at one stage from Jordan. Guy in Jordan.
The king of Jordan,
Probably
probably.
was the king.
Because he was an amateur.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could have been him. That was from Davis in 1981.
JY1.
Yeah. There's something else I was going to say there too, but yeah. So these days it's more VHF and UHF, because HF is just too much noise where I live. Most of the time. When I go travelling, I operate HF from the car, but generally only to talk to people I know rather than anything else. So that's about it. Next.
So two stories that come to mind for me. I think the first one was back at the peak of the last solar cycle. So when was that? 2013, 2014? 2012, yeah, something around then. And it was on 10 metres, and I had a guy in... it was about... I think I came home from work. It was about 5 o'clock. 5:30, something like that. And I thought, I'll go out and switch on 10 metres and see who's around. And I was tuning up and down SSB, and this guy was calling CQ, ZS9, is that right? ZS6, South Africa. And I thought, that's interesting, because South Africa's pretty rare from here, and it's pretty hard DX from here. So anyway, I went back to him, and he was... pretty reasonable signal, about a 5x5, I think, at the time. And he said, I was just been talking to ZL stations. I said, oh, okay. He says, yeah, they're real strong at the moment. So we had a chat for about probably 45 minutes to an hour on 10 metres. And I said, look, I've got to go inside. I'm going to have some dinner, and I might come out later on, see if you're still there. And he said, yeah, no worries. And anyway, and I'm only running a Station Master vertical on top of the roof of the garage, 100 watts. I think he was running a beaming our way. So anyway, I come back up after lunch, dinner at about 7 o'clock or something. I said, you still there? He said, yeah, I'm still here. And he was 5x9 by this stage, coming right up. So I think it would have been probably spring, I reckon, springtime. It was just starting to get dark. And I spoke to him for like another hour and a half or something. It just kept on going. I couldn't believe it. And I said, look, I want to stick around because I want to see how long this actually goes for. And he didn't fade out till about 9:30 at night. And this was back in the day. I didn't really have a log. I can't remember his call sign, and we never sent QSL cards. But it was one of those contacts I just remember for just the sheer duration of probably 3 or 4 hours talking to this guy, and it was really good to get that DX. And the second one was alluded to earlier, was on 1.2 gigs, and there's a bit of a story behind it, because for years I believe that Rex VK7MO tried to work New Zealand on 1296, was trying to work Nick ZL1IU in the very top end of New Zealand. And I believe that once the signals were so strong on 1296, but you're a bit unprepared, you couldn't find your microphone or something, or there was something that...
No, the signals were not strong.
No, this was a few years before.
That's right. They weren't strong.
Strong enough for a contact?
I could copy him, but he detected me, but we didn't complete.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought there was a story about you couldn't find a hand mic or something like that, and you couldn't... okay, maybe that's another story. Anyway, for years you'd been trying... for years you've been trying 1.2 gigs and not being able to make it. So in 2020, January 2020, there was a particular day where it was forecast to be about 40 degrees here in Hobart, and we looked at the Hepburn charts, and there's this massive high system over the Tasman, and Hepburn looked like there was a nice tropospheric duct across to New Zealand. And I said to Murray and Richard, I said, let's go portable and see if we can work 1296. So we went just outside of Kingston. We went up onto a place called One Tree Hill and set up there early in the morning and called Nick, and 2 meters he come up. He was 40 over. He was rocking signal in.
At like 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. So then we went to 70 centimetres, and he was there, but not as strong. And 1296, he wasn't there at all. Anyway, we sat there throughout the day, and we're trying and calling, and then eventually we heard word through that Rex had worked him on 1296. And then once we heard that had happened, we listened and listened and listened, and we could just hear him from our location at One Tree Hill. So I had my laptop with me, and I just so happened to have my remote station running, which was out west of Hobart, up on a high,
And at higher altitude.
at a higher
closer to
altitude,
the duct.
at a higher altitude, about 930 meters, and about Rex worked ZL, which set a new VK7 record and a national record, and then 11 minutes later, I worked Nick, and extended that by 30 kilometres or something like that. So Rex held the record for 11 minutes, and then I extended it. Cheated a little bit because it was over a remote station, but still, record's a record. So that was good, and we've subsequently worked Nick on 2.4 gigs and 1.2 gigs from just outside of Orford up on Three Thumbs Lookout, which looks directly over Maria Island. And 2.4 gigs was quite difficult as well, because I had to learn CW on the spot pretty quickly, hand copy what he was sending, and we managed a CW contact as well, which is my only CW contact so far, and probably ever likely to be. So that was they were memorable contacts. But as far as DXCC, yeah, I don't particularly have. I have on QRZ a country count of how many countries I've worked. Most of it's FT8, which is reasonably easy, especially in the lower end of the cycle. But now it's sort of, I'm trying to get SSB. That's kind of where it's at. With the exception of 6 meters, I think it was not last year, but the year before, I worked my first US station on 6 meters, and the guy doesn't usually do a QSL card, but I asked for one, and he said, "Yeah, I'll send that to you." And he was in Arizona, so I worked. That was good.
6 metres.
That was good to work him on 6 meters. Yeah.
On FT8 or sideband?
It was on FT8. Sideband's the next. That's the next challenge. FT8, and it was at a really weird time. It was about 7 a.m. in the morning here. So.
Did you work that 6 metre guy in Samoa that came up during the summer field day?
I've worked the Cook Islands before on 6 meters, FT8. The furthest SSB I think I've worked on 6 meters is which one's further, Fiji or New Caledonia? New Caledonia, I think.
No, Fiji.
Fiji. Antoine, 3D2AG. He's the furthest I've worked on 6 meters voice. I think he's further than Japan.
No.
Okay, then it's Japan. Japan's pretty easy on 6. but yeah, so that my main interest is 6 meters DX. So you have to be very patient and wait for it to appear. But when it does, it's very rewarding, and VHF and above. So is there? I know Justin's got some. He's got some DX stories, which I think he's going to pop out. But does anyone else have any others that they want to share, or any questions, or
DX/social experience?
Yep, Harry.
All right.
Oh, Steve as well. Yep. Go, Steve, then Harry.
Yeah. Okay. So my background is that I'm one of those limited licenses that was never allowed on HF, and was suddenly gifted the privileges along with a heap of other people when wharf requirements were dropped. So hallelujah. And so I need to get a HF station set up. So not a lot of money available. So on the cost, basically, I managed to acquire a Hills Telemast. So it's a 30-foot pole, 3 sections, and found enough room in the yard to put up a full-size G5 RV, which went from one corner of the yard down halfway down the side fence towards the front yard, which my wife was really impressed with. And it wasn't a great G5 RV, but it worked. I mean, it was fed with RG6, and the ugly balance would have wound around a 5-litre ice cream tub, but it worked. So I was a bit surprised one day when I was listening around, and I could hear an American station And I worked him because he was nice and strong. Turned out he was on the east coast. Maybe 5 minutes later, I worked a station in France. Absolutely blown away. Both of them were 5x9 contacts, so just out of the blue, wasn't expecting it. And that's got to be the most memorable DX contact I've ever had. More recently, I've had a bit of fun on 6 metres and a few other things, but that's been fun. But you just remember that first one. It's really good.
I've got a bit of a mixed, a 2-in-1, a DX and soda in one. So earlier this year, I teamed up with a friend of mine who's here in the club rooms tonight, and we went to Tim Shea, and we did an activation there. We got quite a few on 40, and then late in the evening we thought we'll give some other bands a try, and then we came across 15 metres. So we did quite a few calls on 15. And as we got later into the evening, oh boy, did we get some contacts. We got, SM4JCM, right up to New Zealand station and even Japan. I think I remember about 6 or 7 Japan stations from memory. So it was just absolutely amazing, all these stations coming in. And the second we finished making the contact, another station would come in to try and make a contact as well. And I was kind of looking at him thinking, are we ever going to be able to go home on time? What's the go here? So it was just absolute amazing that we had so many stations. It was a short amount of time too. I think we worked them in like 30 minutes or less than an hour, wasn't it? From memory?
The walk wasn't that long. But I think
talking about the radio, not the walk.
We got in trouble for getting home late. I was in trouble.
Yeah.
I particularly remember that. I particularly remember that trip for my first ever contact into South Korea. So I was quite pleased with that day.
It was just absolutely amazing, all the contacts that we made, and I still remember it to this day. It's absolute amazing. Like there were clear signals. There were none that were. I think there were a couple. They were a bit noisy, bit struggly to work, but majority of them, beautiful clean signals into where we were. It was absolutely amazing, which was really good.
There's some comments online that you just made me remember when you mentioned South Korea. So one of the most rarest DX going around, Andy Cowley, who's one of our overseas members, says, my first DX was in 1982 and it was North Korea. And there's not that many. There's not that many people that have worked North Korea. They're bit rare on the activations. Darren VK7HH says his only non-FT8 DX was to Flinders Island, but the VK5 Flinders Island, VK5 FIL. So yeah, there's a few DX stories coming through there, but we mentioned Japan a couple of times. If you ever work Japanese stations, you work one, and all of a sudden you have about 50, and they'll pile up on, but they are very polite, and they'll wait. And if you say, like, because you got JA, JH, JA1, JH8, something like that. If you say station ending in whatever phonetic, and they'll all stop and they'll wait, even though they might not be able to hear that other station, they'll hear you work them, and then you'll call QRZ or CQ again, and all of a sudden, and they're all trying to pile in. But yeah, Japan's good DX, and good to work.
Used to get a lot of it up at 6 metres there, Hayden. When I was on ice.
Yeah.
I used to work the Japanese on 6 metres. I was moving through sometimes.
Yeah.
I can hear them in my head now. 6 metres.
Yeah. Yeah. And now they're all on FT8.
Yeah.
They all hang out there now.
And that's another thing I've noticed as well, because I've recently started playing FT8, especially on 40 metres. There's Japan everywhere on 40 metres and 15 metres. 15 15 usually through the day, but overnight it's just booming.
I think Justin should probably come out now and do his. Yeah, here we go. He'll come out now and do his DX stories.
Yeah, getting zeroed in.
Or is Kim? Or have you got one?
I've got a talking stick, thank you, sir. DX, I was on Willis for 6 months back in the 80s, and propagation was pretty good. There's always a clown somewhere, isn't there? Anyway, propagation was pretty good, but the thing that was interesting was I had a QSL manager, or two actually, Heather 6HD and Jill's 6YL, I think, JL. Anyway, so they did all the card work for me, which was good because I ended up with boxes of QSL cards. And the thing that was interesting up there was I worked 6 metres down to 80 metres. I had a 6 metre beam and a Yaesu 10 watt 6 metre rig. I could work out, when propagation was good, I could work out nearly to Hawaii, out that far into the Pacific and up into Japan and roundabout, because I was only a few metres over the sea. I had salt water underneath me, and the noise level wasn't too bad because it was Dunlight generators, so no background noise. I don't think there was a UPS in the whole place, and it was pre-computers. Probably the closest thing we would have had to a computer was the satellite terminal. It was receive only satellite too, because we used to watch the TV on it. But that was good. And then on HF, there was still a couple of masts standing out there. They were about 25 metre aluminium, like a yacht mast section, aerofoil section. So I would run V antennas off them, and I was restricted because I wanted to go 80 metres up, but I couldn't run them out as a V on 80 metres because I was getting into the water. So I just folded the bottoms back in, which was quite convenient. So if you wanted to retune them for a different band, you could just unhook them and refold the bottom back in. So instead of it being a 40 metre leg for 80 metres, then you made it a, whatever leg you want for the higher frequencies, and just hung them up with a bit of string. The horizontal leg was probably only 1.5 metres off the ground. Worked fine, it was convenient, and they survived the winds. It was always breezy there. Station count, well, multiple thousands, I can't remember how many now. I was well over 100 countries. I worked every state in the US and the offshore islands like Hawaii, etc., and Alaska. Well, that's not really an island, but offshore, or remote, on 40 metres. And that was a pretty good effort. It took a bit of doing. There were a couple of states that I had problems getting, and I ended up using blokes in the states to round some people off to get them on air, so we could actually have a contact. But they were I think it was maybe North or South Dakota where there were very few owners, and the time zones didn't line up too well. But we got there, which was good. But one of the things, also working in Antarctic off Australis, and up there you start to see the propagation. If you stay in one place and you operate and look around and listen to what you're hearing, there's no point trying to call somebody if they're completely out and you're not haven't got any propagation. So like in Antarctica, you'll start hearing the eastern side stations first, and then as the sun moves across, you'll go Pacific, Japan, Eastern Asia, like Russia, China, that area, and then it works its way across until you get to Europe over a few hours. And Bert VK7HH did a voyage with me one time, and he was a mad keen DXer, and he'd be there up in the radio room for like 6 hours straight after he'd knocked off, and so come on, Bert, it's 2 o'clock, gotta go to bed. I'll go to bed soon. But you just go backwards and forwards seeing how it was going. You'd see the propagation coming through. Wallace was a bit the same too, but probably not quite so pronounced because it was closer to the equator. It was only 15 south, whereas when we were mucking around the Antarctic, we were probably about 55 south. So you would see that. You could also see often long paths come in, where you wouldn't be going north, you'd get if you're going out to the south or out to the southwest. So I think that if you're going to contest and look for DX, you need to probably do a little bit of homework beforehand and work out for the time when you're operating who's around and what you're likely to hear, and then you've got a chance of knowing whether you can actually work them. And wire antennas, if you just have a temporary antenna or a quick antenna, wire antennas work a treat. Just as long as you can get the apex up. And
And with the ones on Willis, it was RG8, so it was really flash feed line, straight into a bellum that I made, and so it was 50 ohms in and straight out. I went out for like 600 ohms or something like that because it was convenient. I can't remember now, but it wasn't sort of like 50-50. It was something that was reasonable, and it worked pretty well. It would load on multiple bands. Yeah, that's me. I think I can't think of anything else. I'm not active here at the moment. I should be. My wife keeps asking me, "You've got all this gear. Why don't you talk to somebody?"
You got the opposite problem that all of us have. She's saying, "Why don't you get on the air?" And they're telling us to get off the air.
Then I say, well, I am talking to you now.
I'll just make a comment. I agree that wire antennas are the way to fly. More copper the better. And inverted V is the way to fly, really. And just make a comment on what Hayden said about the Japanese being very polite. It's really true, and when you think there's two cultures up there close together, you've got the Japanese that are very polite, and then you go across the water to China and they're at the other end of the spectrum. Anyway, enough of that.
I was just going to. There was one contact I had when I was up in Tom Price. There was I was talking to a Russian station in central Siberia, and it was January, and there was 90 degrees centigrade difference in temperature between us. And where I was, it was 45 degrees, which is pretty normal for the Pilbara in midsummer. And where he was, it was minus 45. And he told me, he said, on the coldest nights it can drop below minus 60. And I said, I'm surprised your antenna works at that temperature.
He probably was surprised yours didn't melt.
Yeah. And he said when it gets below minus 60, he said if you have to go outside, you have to put a rag across your face. He said because the air is so cold, it snap freezes on your lungs if you breathe it straight in. So I remember that contact very well. So that's amazing. 90 degrees difference. But I've had quite a lot of Japanese contacts up there. We've got a lot of them. A lot on 6 meters, but I had quite a few on HF as well. So no problems. Anybody else?
Didn't the Japanese have a lot of radio clubs where they would get together and all line up with the use of the microphone? I'm sure they had clubs, radio clubs.
The JARL's obviously like the national club, I suppose, but I'm not really. Japan's an interesting culture, isn't it, when it comes to amateur radio? It's like it's embedded in the culture. You'll walk around and you'll see all of these. I've seen on YouTube. I've never been to Japan, but you see all these electronic stores and
Akihabara.
Yeah.
In Tokyo.
And big icon signs like you would Subway down here, or big banners.
I've never been there, but my bucket list includes the Tokyo Hamfest because a number of my mates have been there and just said, "Wow, just phenomenal." So,
do you want the mic?
I got a question for the floor.
Yeah.
A couple of nights ago, I was noticing interference on slow scan signals on 20 metres. So I went and had a listen. And first thing I noticed was that there was 3 frequencies that were showing sideband activity. They were always like 14227, 14230, 14233, showing this same pattern of a 5 or 10 second period of sideband signals, then a small gap, then another 5 or 10 second period of sideband signals. When I listened into it, what I was hearing was about 100 people putting their call signs out from all over the place. They were just everywhere. But I couldn't hear who they were trying to get hold of. But they were constantly repeating. So this was a pile-up I was listening to. But the bit that got me was that it was on 3 frequencies next to each other.
Split, yeah.
And everybody gets it all wrong which one they're transmitting on, or they're trying on the wrong frequency. But the third one's probably
I've never heard of
pile again that started off, so it'll be an expedition somewhere.
Yeah, the DX station calls on one frequency which no one else calls on. That's just the DX frequency. But then they listen up or down
They
to
listen
where all the
across a
calling
number of
stations are.
frequencies. There was hundreds of stations there.
Yeah, okay.
It was the most unbelievable thing. Anyway,
Mm.
nice friend of Justin.
Just some experiences, and there's a couple of people who have said around antennas and bits and pieces, and there's been some comments on the chat that I've been watching go past. Whisper is a fantastic antenna testing tool, and it can be done without you being there. You leave it going, and you can see what you hear, and if you're transmitting, who's hearing you.
Can find aircraft too.
Hey, well and truly.
Not proven.
We'll let it go. Not going to go there.
Anyway, sorry, that was a joke.
Whisper as a tool, if you are wondering what your antenna can hear or who can hear you on that antenna, leave Whisper going. It can only be 10 watts, and let it go for a week, and then look at the Whisper record, and you'll be amazed. You'll be absolutely amazed. So, Whisper. Can I just say, I had a look before this talk at my QSL cards, because I am not a big QSL card person, but I used to be, and it was in the 1990s at the 22 cycle. So cycle 22. Now, when I look at the peak of 22, we are getting to that peak in 25. So, and 22, that was not, it peaked in around 1990. If we're getting those sort of peaks, it's fantastic. Wow. Watch this space.
And just quickly on that, in the last week, we've hit
off the show
our solar
numbers.
flux index was over 300. It was like
347.
Yeah,
Well, true.
and the sunspot was over 300, I think, at one point.
Have a look at the pictures of the sun and the number of big black parts on the sun. It's just phenomenal.
And the reason why we don't see anything on HF yet is because the Earth's just being blasted with it all, and we've got to wait for it to just settle down before we actually see the
We're going to get that by the weekend.
effects. Maybe.
Yeah, well and truly.
Yeah, it's just all these flares that wreck it. But I think that was larger than the previous solar cycle ever got to.
Yeah.
And I think it was like the highest in like 20 years or something.
The last cycle we had was a real
climate change.
depressed cycle. The one before that wasn't bad, but the 1990, that's getting to the that was at the sort of levels we're now starting to see. There are there are three contacts that stick in my mind. I was heading to South Australia, and I activated in SOTA Mount Zero, which is at the end of the Grampians, if people know it. It's before you get to Horsham. Just before you get to Horsham, you can turn off and do Mount Zero. It's only 2 or 4 points or whatever. And it was stinking hot. Middle of the day, made the contacts on 40 metres, thought, try 15. Tried, absolutely nothing. And then this guy comes back to me from Colorado, 5'9 plus. It was like he was standing next to me, and I started talking to him, and like he would have been in the middle of the night, and I said, "Oh, what's the operating position?" He said, "Oh, it's an FT817 with a linked dipole barefoot." And I just went. I looked down. And I went. It's an FT817 with a linked dipole barefoot. 5 watts.
Was that the SOTA seller? Yeah.
That was it. It was. When you were driving, you were going somewhere, and we were both on the boat together.
Yes. And we actually worked you from the car.
No, correct.
But we heard that guy in Colorado.
Correct.
Mobile on a mobile whip.
So, I always remember Roger Harrison saying at one GIPSTech, his ionosphere talks, one of his many ionosphere talks, saying it is open from one place to another all the time. You just need to know where.
No, you just need to be active and on the radio.
And I think it was Kim who said, in Antarctica, you get a feel for what the propagation's doing.
And I remember Martin, 7GN, saying exactly the same thing. That if you do it for long enough, you know that at this particular point of the time, this particular part of the season...
Yeah, time of the year too is really critical. That's the thing, like,
that was
we
one I
do,
was
we
going
do
to add.
on Willis, the work into the States for 80 and 40 metres was really good. By the time the summer came around, starting in thunderstorms, it was hopeless, it was too noisy. But that's why wire antennas, verticals are noisy compared with the wire antennas too. There's swings and roundabouts, you just work out what works at the time. Talking about Whisper, can you jump frequencies on? Can you jump?
Yeah.
That?
You can set it up
You
to.
could use that as a sounding device.
Yep.
You could have it running. You could do 4 or 5 frequencies, like 4 or 5 bands, and then repeat and do it every hour. And if you kept going like for a week or so, you'd have a pretty good idea of where your propagation was at what time of the day, rather than sitting there listening to your radio for 24 hours a day.
Nice
tuning
spot on.
around. That's like that, look at that. That's good.
Sort of location in the way of.
Yeah. But it's like you have predictions come out for commercial HF, like for aircraft and so forth, and they predict from this point to that point what band you should be on, what your take-off angle is.
It's a service that Bomb put together.
But that actually allows you to get what I guess is going to give you when it's real time. It's not a prediction of the future.
Yep.
There's no guarantee that today's going to be the same as tomorrow.
They have a whole range of products for a whole range of areas where they put out those predictions, well and truly.
The other one, and I'll point at Jim here for my very light antenna. Jim sparked my interest back with end-fed half-wave antennas, which I dug out my end-fed half-wave antenna.
Yeah.
I thought I'll set it up in the backyard, and this is only months ago. This was before we did the Rodway range.
In South Hobart?
Yeah, in South Hobart.
What, living on the edge in South Hobart?
Yeah, I'm living on the edge, definitely. The windy edge.
Sorry.
And I'll just let that go through the camera. I set it up, I tuned it, I got it back right again, connected it to the IC705, so we're talking 10 watts because it was on a battery.
Yep.
The first contact I made was with France.
Wow.
So, and the guy was very indignant.
What band?
Was very, was for 20 metres, I think. It was 20 metres. Or, either 20 or 15, it was one or the other. But the guy said to me, what is it? I described it, and he went, I'm running like 400 watts, and he was on a beam. And so, yeah, it's open somewhere all the time. And the last one I wanted to say was, I contacted this station that had a really weird call sign, and I thought, I think this is a pirate station. But it was like it was whatever the Nepalese call sign is, and I don't remember what it was, but it was NV 800 something. And I contacted this state, eventually got through. There was an absolute pile-up. Got through, got this, and this QSL card appears, and it was the 800th anniversary of some Nepalese god, and it was a special event station. And fantastic QSL card, I should have brought it along, but fantastic QSL card. And so if you hear strange call signs, don't immediately think that they're pirate stations. Contact them, because you might get a pretty impressive QSL card out of it. Anyway, so yeah, cool.
The other thing I just thought about too was, which a few have spoken about, was don't underestimate the power of water and the sea and going down and operating near there. So Peter Parker, VK3YE, will go and wade in the water in Victoria with like a little loop and his 817, and he's like working DX all over the place. And it's like amazing signals, and he's like walking around with a coupler around his ankle.
He's got a piece of aluminium in his ankle.
And it's just amazing what he does. And I didn't really realise it until one day I was on Bruny Island, and I was at Adventure Bay, only about 100 metres from the water, and I set up the NFED. It was amazing how quiet it was and how many stations there were and what you could hear and what you could work. It was just unbelievable.
The next a good spot there.
Yeah.
Big spots on the side of the water boats.
Yeah. So sometimes you think, oh, I should get up on top of a high mountain or something, and I'll get better signal. But sometimes with HF, getting as low as you can go and right down near the water really helps.
Cable beach and brooms. Cable beach and brooms another good one for that because you can drive onto it.
Just get off before the tide comes up.
Yeah.
With
Watch
the
out
water,
for
I've
the
heard it
camels.
called an H2O amplifier.
H2O amplifier, yeah. H2O amp. Yeah. All right. Any other questions, comments, stories? No? All right. Well, good DX.
Favourite antennas?
Favourite antennas?
Yeah.
Anything.
Well, see, Kim said about verticals and their being noise level. I know a lot of stations pick vertical antennas for their DX capability. And then they generally maybe have another antenna for receive to cut down on the noise. But
vertical's only half the antenna because the rest of it's in the ground. You need a ground under it
Yeah.
for it to work properly. So you need a bit of real estate to get a decent earth mount or some sort of.
And generally, the more wire you can get in the air, the better, right? So,
high and clear.
beams, Yagis. But not everyone can have an HF Yagi.
At 930 metres.
Or a no, there's no HF Yagis at 930 metres. Hexbeam? Oh yeah, tell us about the Hexbeam.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I managed to acquire the Hexbeam that was at the last conference. I've had it now for nearly 2 years, and I'm the kind of person who puts up an antenna and expects to do zero maintenance on it, never have to do anything to it, and it has lived up to that. It's a great antenna. I took the 6 metre element off it because I wasn't able to run 6 metres on that antenna, so I've got a separate antenna for 6 metres, but other than that, it's running on 5 bands quite happily, all day, every day. I used to pull it down when it was really windy, but now I don't. The antenna and the tower can handle the strong wind we have here, so I'm very happy with it. Good antenna.
I'll make another comment.
Yeah, just another quick one. The advantage of a vertical is it's omnidirectional. So if you want a spotting antenna to have a listen around and you don't want to be swinging your beam around the whole time listening, you can just use that and then flick it across back to the beam when you found somebody you want to talk to a particular band. So there's merits in different antennas for different applications.
I'll just make one quick comment. You've probably heard me moaning after doing the 40 metre broadcast on Sunday about not even being able to hear any callbacks or only being able to hear half of them. And that's with I use an inverted V for the transmission side of it. Anyway, I've been getting a lot of interference, I think, from solar panels next door, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, I decided I'd have a go at an NVIS antenna, and I put the house in the way, so I put the antenna on the other side of the house, so I've got the house in between the house next door. But anyway, I put up a dipole so I can walk under it, so it's just about 2 metres off the ground. At the moment I don't have any reflectors on it, so it's just a low dipole, and that just made an incredible difference to knocking down the noise level from wherever it may come from, and the signals quite often are even stronger, even though it's only a third of the height, I guess, of the inverted V that I use for the transmission of the broadcast. And I've done a couple of transmissions on that for the broadcast on the low NVIS type antenna, and nobody's complained yet. So there is 40 metres seems to be a good band for having antennas close to the ground if you're trying to miss out on some interference, or for whatever reason you can't get it up very high. 40 metres seems to be a good band for low antennas.
Ron just asked what's NVIS, near vertical instant skywave. So rather than us, we've been talking about DX, trying to make your signal go as far as you can and trying to aim it at the horizon. Instead, this is pointing your signal straight up in the air. And then reducing your skip distance, basically, so local.
It all depends on how successful it is, I guess, depending on what the composite of your ground is that you're underneath your antenna. So
And your frequency can't be too high, otherwise it punches through.
yeah, it doesn't work.
So it's sort of if you're in a military
Anything
situation, you
over
want to
eight.
talk to your blokes around you, but you don't want to talk to the enemy who are 50 miles away. You run an NVIS antenna.
And lowering your antenna closer to the ground increases the height of your lobe to straight up in the air. Well, ideally. Theoretically.
Still cover Tasmania anyway,
Yeah.
it appears.
Yeah. Skip distance. Very good. All right. Well, thanks everyone for your thoughts and good DX. We've got the RD contest this weekend on starting Saturday at 1 p.m. through to Sunday 1 p.m. So everyone, even if you just get on for 5-10 minutes and make a couple of contacts and put in a log, that's the most
5
important
or
thing.
10 minutes every 3 hours, people.
5 or 10 minutes, yeah. And more importantly, between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. to get double the points. So
I'll ring you up and see what frequency you're on.
well,
That's against the spirit of the.
we have a chat channel. We have a couple of chat channels. So probably channel 50 is not a good one, but 1296.150 is a good one if you got that. 439, 146.5. Anyway, all the frequencies were posted in the broadcast, and we'll put them on Discord as well. All the basic frequencies we use. Yeah, good luck everyone, and
Please come up.
yeah,
The more the merrier.
and let's make VK7 win again. For the
They're going to ban us eventually.
we're gonna. I still think they're gonna come up with a handicap system at some point because, yeah.
To be honest, we're just too good. We're just too good.
No,
We do have a significant advantage.
No, we're using
we
the
have
system.
a concentration of amateurs that actually come on and do it. That's the advantage.
VK6 used to be a big competitor.
We're just not the number of amateurs involved, but it's also those that are dedicated and competitive. It's a combination of the two.
And winning the state trophy is all about number of amateurs versus number
and
of amateurs
score,
participating.
and overall score. Yeah, it is.
There's waiting for VK7, obviously, with amateurs versus.
Yeah, no, but the score doesn't come into us. It's just number of logs versus number of amateurs licensed in the state.
No, it's the score.
Total score.
It's the
Total
score.
score.
Total score comes into it as well.
Wow.
Cumulative
Well, there you go.
Cumulative score.
But
It's not a way.
but we want competition. Bring it on. Come on, VK. Come on, VK6. What are you doing?
Yeah, but don't get too good.
Yeah, but don't get.
Also, too, I have noticed there's a number of people that may be doing the contest for the first time. I'll wish them good luck and have fun.
Oh, and put in a team. If you
Yes.
get a team of 3, submit a team. So send that to the contest manager. It can be anyone,
You'll need to send it off pretty soon.
and come up with a creative name, and yeah, get the teams going. So, thanks everyone.
Charlie.